My mama loved you so much, and she appreciated your love for her. And I'm sorry that she couldn't hang on until...
When Naomi Judd passed away in April 2022, the world paused to mourn a woman whose life had been defined by music, love, and the courage to face struggles that most people never see. Naomi was not only a celebrated singer and songwriter, but she was also a mother, a mentor, and a symbol of resilience. For millions of fans, her songs captured the joys, heartbreaks, and perseverance of everyday life. Hits like Mama, He's Crazy, Why Not Me, and Love Can Build a Bridge showcased not just her remarkable talent, but her ability to tell stories that resonated deeply with listeners. Yet, behind the glamour, the awards, and the applause, Naomi carried burdens that remained hidden from the public eye for decades. Mental illness, trauma, and personal hardships quietly shadowed her life, even as her voice rang out across stages and airwaves. For her daughter, Ashley Judd, grief was not something distant or abstract. It was personal, immediate, and life-changing. The moment she found her mother's lifeless body after a self-inflicted gunshot wound was one of unimaginable horror and sorrow. Ashley later described holding her mother as life slipped away, a moment that no daughter should ever experience, yet one that would shape her mission to speak openly about mental health. In her grief, Ashley chose not to remain silent. She wanted the world to understand that Naomi's death was not a result of weakness or failure, but of a chronic and devastating illness that had affected her mind and heart in ways that even fame, family, and faith could not always overcome. By speaking publicly, Ashley transformed personal tragedy into a story of truth, advocacy, and compassion. She addressed the media not to satisfy curiosity, but to honor her mother's life, to fight stigma, and to emphasize that mental illness deserves understanding, not judgment. This choice demonstrated an extraordinary courage, as she faced both private pain and public attention at the same time. The world learned through Ashley's words that Naomi's death at age 76 was not an isolated event, but the culmination of decades of hidden suffering. In a carefully chosen statement, Ashley and her sister Juana described it as the disease of mental illness, highlighting that depression and other conditions are illnesses, not moral failings. This framing was deliberate, a way to shift the conversation away from blame and toward awareness. Naomi's posthumous induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame further reflected her immense influence and the complexity of her legacy. While fans celebrated her remarkable career and contributions to music, Ashley and Juana bore the weight of private grief, navigating the tension between public recognition and personal loss. The world saw a successful performer and public figure, but the Judd family understood the quiet battles she fought every day. These moments, both tragic and triumphant, illustrate the complicated intersections of fame, mental health, and family, and they underscore the importance of compassion, awareness, and support for those struggling with illnesses of the mind. Naomi Judd's life was shaped as much by struggle as by triumph, and understanding her story requires looking at the challenges she faced long before fame ever touched her. Born Diana Ellen Judd on January 10, 1946, in Ashland, Kentucky, she grew up in a world marked by both love and loss. Her early years were far from easy, and tragedy struck early in her life when her brother, Brian, died from leukemia. The loss left a permanent mark on Naomi's heart, a reminder how fragile life could be and how quickly grief can enter a family's life. At a young age, Naomi became a mother, giving birth to her first daughter, Juana, while still in high school. Facing the pressures of teenage parenthood, she struggled with societal expectations, financial hardships, and the need to provide stability for her child. The father of her daughter, a local football player named Charles Jordan, did not accept responsibility, leaving Naomi to navigate motherhood largely on her own. Out of necessity and societal pressure, she married another man, Michael Simonella, and moved to California, hoping for a fresh start. But life's challenges were relentless. Naomi endured the strain of a failed marriage, the difficulties of raising two daughters on her own, and the constant search for a way to survive in a world that often seemed indifferent to her struggles. She worked tirelessly in jobs that were far from glamorous, nursing, waitressing, and modeling, all to keep food on the table and a roof over her family's heads. Despite these hardships, Naomi found solace and strength in music. Singing became both a therapeutic outlet and a way to connect with her daughters, particularly Juana. In the quiet, lonely nights, The act of harmonizing and performing allowed her to release the pain and express emotions that words alone could not capture. Music became a companion, a friend, and eventually a career that would change the course of her life. Yet even as she discovered her voice and her talent, the shadows of her past never fully lifted. Naomi's memoir, River of Time, My Descent into Depression and How I Emerged with Hope, revealed the depth of her struggles, including experiences of abuse, betrayal, and repeated personal setbacks. She spoke candidly about the need to parent herself in her youth, to find the inner strength to survive situations that left lasting scars. These experiences shaped not only the resilience that would carry her through years of fame, but also the vulnerabilities that would persist behind the scenes. Her story reminds us that the visible success of life does not always reveal the hidden battles within, and that pain, when left unspoken, can linger silently, affecting even the brightest and most accomplished individuals. For Ashley Judd, witnessing her mother navigate these challenges provided insight into the complexities of love, care, and mental illness. Ashley saw both the courage and fragility that coexisted in Naomi, and this understanding became central to her decision to speak openly after her mother's death. By contextualizing Naomi's life story, her early tragedies, her perseverance, and her discovery of music as healing, viewers and readers gain a fuller picture of why Ashley emphasized that her mother's death was the result of a disease, not a choice, and why sharing the truth was so important in breaking the silence around mental health by the late 1970s and early 1980s. Naomi Judd's life began to shift in ways that brought both opportunity and pressure. After years of struggling to make ends meet, she and her daughter Wana, later known professionally as Winona, started performing together, initially at local churches and community events. Their voices blended seamlessly, each complementing the other in a way that spoke to both the heart and soul. What began as small performances soon caught the attention of Nashville music producers, impressed not only by their harmonies but by the raw emotion and authenticity they brought to every song. In 1983, with nothing more than a simple cassette tape and their determination, Naomi and Winona auditioned for RCA Records. The result was immediate. They were signed on the spot, and the Judds, a mother-daughter duo, were officially born. The Judds quickly became one of the most beloved acts in country music history. Their songs, including Mama, He's Crazy, Why Not Me, Love Can Build a Bridge, and Grandpa Tell Me About the Good Old Days, resonated with audiences across the nation. These hits not only showcased their musical talent, but also captured universal themes of love, struggle, and hope. Awards followed, including multiple Grammys, and their records sold millions, cementing their place in music history. Yet alongside this meteoric rise came pressures that were unseen by fans. Naomi, who had once been focused solely on survival, now had to navigate the demands of fame, including rigorous touring schedules, public appearances, and the constant scrutiny that comes with being a public figure. She was a mother, manager, and performer, roles that often conflicted with one another. Working closely with Winona created both beauty and tension. Naomi was protective and, at times, controlling, wanting to ensure her daughter's success and safety, while Winona sought independence and creative freedom. These tensions were normal in any parent-child relationship, but in the glare of the spotlight, disagreements could feel magnified and public. Naomi later reflected that balancing family and career was one of her greatest challenges. Behind the glittering gowns, standing ovations, and smiles, she often felt the weight of exhaustion, pressure, and isolation. Even in moments of triumph, there was a constant undercurrent of responsibility and concern, a reminder that life as a performer was far more complicated than it appeared. In addition to pressures of fame, Naomi faced significant health challenges that would alter her career and her personal life. In 1991, at the peak of the Judd success, she received a diagnosis of hepatitis C, a potentially life-threatening liver disease contracted years earlier. Doctors initially gave her only 3 years to live, a prognosis that stunned fans and forced Naomi to make difficult decisions about her career and future. She announced her retirement, shocking the music world, and leaving her daughter, Winona, to navigate the complexities of performing without her mother by her side. Their farewell tour became a nationwide emotional event, a final chance for fans to celebrate the duo's achievements while witnessing a deeply personal and painful chapter in Naomi's life unfold publicly. Yet even as she stepped away from the stage, Naomi's spirit and resilience continued to define her life. Experimental treatments eventually saved her physical health, but the mental and emotional challenges she had faced did not disappear. The combination of past trauma, the pressures of fame, and ongoing battles with depression created an internal struggle that would follow her for the rest of her life. This duality, public success and private suffering, helped shape the perspective Ashley Judd would later share with the world. By understanding the context of her mother's career, achievements, and challenges, audiences can better appreciate why Ashley emphasized that Naomi's death was not a matter of choice or weakness, but rather the culmination of decades of unseen battles with mental illness. Naomi's story, both inspiring and tragic, demonstrates that even those who shine brightly in public can carry private burdens that remain hidden from view, and it sets the stage for Ashley's courage in speaking out to honor her mother's truth. Even after Naomi Judd physically recovered from hepatitis C, her mental and emotional battles did not end. Surviving a life-threatening illness brought relief, but also intensified the shadows that had long been part of her life. Naomi faced depression that was relentless, unpredictable, and deeply isolating. While the world saw her as vibrant, accomplished, and resilient, she often felt a quiet despair that few could understand. Her memoir, River of Time, revealed the depth of these struggles, describing periods where she could barely get out of bed, where days passed without conversation, movement, or hope. Medication helped at times, but it came with side effects like tremors, facial swelling, and hair loss, all of which chipped away at her confidence and sense of self. Therapy became a lifeline, offering strategies and coping mechanisms. Yet there were still days when the illness whispered cruelly that she was unloved, inadequate, or a burden. Even as she continued to perform, write, and inspire millions, Naomi was secretly fighting a personal battle, a reminder that mental illness is not always visible, and that it does not disappear even in the presence of love, support, or success. Despite these ongoing challenges, Naomi chose to become a public advocate for mental health awareness, using her voice to educate and inspire others. She spoke openly about depression as a disease of the brain, emphasizing that it was not a personal weakness or failure. Naomi participated in conferences, joined fundraising initiatives for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and co-wrote letters urging policymakers and the public to prioritize suicide prevention and mental health resources. Her advocacy was courageous, not because it was easy, but because it required confronting her own vulnerabilities while asking the world to listen, understand, and act. For her daughter, Ashley Judd, witnessing her mother navigate these struggles created a deep sense of empathy and understanding. Ashley, who had endured her own traumas and challenges, recognized both the courage and fragility in Naomi's life. Their bond grew even stronger during critical moments, such as when Ashley survived a near-fatal accident in the Congo in 2021, and Naomi cared for her with unwavering devotion. These experiences created a unique intimacy between mother and daughter, one that was built on shared pain, trust, and love. When Naomi passed away in 2022, Ashley faced unimaginable grief, not only the loss of her mother, but the trauma of having discovered her in her final moments. Yet, even in the midst of this personal devastation, Ashley made a conscious decision to speak out publicly. She chose to describe the truth of her mother's death with honesty and care, emphasizing the role of mental illness and refusing to let sensationalism or rumor dominate the narrative. Ashley's interviews, most notably with Diane Sawyer, highlighted the importance of shifting the conversation around suicide from judgment to understanding. She stressed that the correct language, saying someone died by suicide rather than committed suicide, acknowledged the suffering involved and avoided stigma. Through her words, Ashley honored her mother's life, her struggle, and her humanity, reinforcing the idea that love and empathy are more powerful than shame or silence. Naomi Judd's story, therefore, is not only one of music and fame, but also one of resilience, advocacy, and the ongoing challenge of living with mental illness. Through her daughter's courageous voice, her experiences became lessons for others, that mental illness can affect anyone, that hidden battles are real, and that speaking the truth can be a source of healing, awareness, and hope. Ashley's willingness to share the intimate reality of her mother's life and death created a ripple effect, inspiring conversations about grief, trauma, and mental health, and ensuring that Naomi's legacy will be remembered not only for her music, but for the courage it took to live and advocate. Despite the darkness, Following Naomi Judd's death, the public response was immediate and deeply emotional. Fans, fellow artists, and media outlets around the world mourned the loss of a woman whose music had touched millions, whose voice had inspired generations, and whose life story had demonstrated both resilience and vulnerability. Social media was filled with tributes, remembering not only her songs, but also the messages of hope and love embedded within them. The outpouring of grief was matched by admiration for the Judd family, particularly Winona and Ashley, who had lived through the intimate pain of losing a mother while navigating the pressures of public attention. One of the most poignant moments came during Naomi's posthumous induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Winona, standing on stage in a deeply emotional tribute, carried the weight of both personal and public remembrance. Tears streamed down Ashley's face as she watched her sister honor their mother, her hand pressed to her heart as if physically holding the memory of Naomi close. Ashley's words during this time resonated with audiences worldwide. "My mama loved you so much, and I'm sorry that she couldn't hang on until today." These words encapsulated the duality of grief and pride, of sorrow and celebration. For the Judd family, grief was not a linear process. It shifted shape over time. Winona expressed her sorrow through music, dedicating performances to her mother, and allowing audiences to participate in a shared experience of mourning and healing. Love Can Build a Bridge, one of the Judds' most beloved songs, became more than a hit. It became a ritual of remembrance, a connection between those who had loved Naomi and those who were still learning to process her loss. Meanwhile, Ashley's coping process was quieter but equally deliberate. She spent time in nature, practiced meditation, and continued therapy, focusing on understanding and processing her grief rather than performing it publicly. At the same time, she embraced a broader mission, transforming personal loss into advocacy for mental health awareness. Through essays, interviews, and speeches, Ashley emphasized the importance of empathy, compassion, and open conversations about depression, suicide, and trauma. She highlighted the reality that mental illness does not discriminate and that even individuals surrounded by love and support can succumb to its weight. Her words became a lifeline for families and individuals struggling with similar experiences, showing that grief, while deeply personal, can inspire meaningful change when spoken openly. Ashley also took steps to protect her family's privacy, advocating for laws and policies that respect the sensitive details surrounding suicide, and urging media outlets to prioritize dignity over sensationalism. In doing so, she reinforced a message that Naomi had long championed in her advocacy, that mental health awareness and respectful dialogue are essential for healing and prevention. The public response to these efforts was significant. People praised Ashley for her bravery and transparency, recognizing that sharing personal experiences, especially those involving trauma and loss, requires courage and vulnerability. By combining her own story with her mother's legacy, Ashley created a narrative that not only honored Naomi but also educated and inspired others. This period after Naomi's death illustrated the complex interplay between public mourning and private grief, showing that celebrity loss carries layers of emotional, social, and cultural significance. Yet at the core, it remained deeply human, a family navigating heartbreak, a daughter seeking to tell the truth, and a legacy that extended beyond awards, charts, and performances into the realms of advocacy, empathy, and understanding. The Judds' experience demonstrated that healing is multifaceted, that grief can transform into purpose, and that even in tragedy, there can be moments of connection, reflection, and hope. Ashley Judd's decision to speak publicly about her mother's death marked a turning point in how the conversation around mental health and suicide was framed in the media and public discourse. Just weeks after Naomi Judd passed away, Ashley appeared on Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer, her face calm but her eyes reflecting the weight of unimaginable loss. In that interview, she shared not only the tragic details of discovering her mother, but also the broader context of Naomi's lifelong struggle with mental illness. Ashley emphasized that her mother's death was not an act of weakness or a reflection of character, but the culmination of a chronic disease that had affected her for decades. She explained that depression is not linear, that it can affect anyone regardless of fame, family, or faith, and that even individuals surrounded by love can feel trapped by its shadows. One of Ashley's key points was the importance of language in addressing suicide. She stressed that we should no longer say someone committed suicide, but instead say they died by suicide, because a phrase acknowledges suffering and removes judgment. This careful choice of words was emblematic of Ashley's approach, balancing truth, advocacy, and compassion. Beyond language, Ashley's interviews highlighted the invisible struggles of those living with mental illness. She spoke candidly about the private pain her mother endured, explaining that the illness would whisper lies of inadequacy and unworthiness, even when she was surrounded by care and admiration. By sharing these insights, Ashley provided audiences with a deeper understanding of the human side of depression, illustrating that outward appearances of strength, success, or happiness do not always reveal inner battles. Ashley's courage extended beyond media appearances. She wrote essays and participated in discussions that addressed trauma, grief, and the importance of compassion for those suffering. She advocated for stronger mental health resources, better support systems for families, and policies that protect privacy following the death of a loved one by suicide. Her mission was clear: transform personal grief into societal awareness, and encourage open conversations that could prevent future tragedies. At the same time, Ashley's approach was deeply personal. She balanced public advocacy with private healing, spending time in reflection, meditation, and therapy. She emphasized that grieving is not a performance, but a deeply personal journey that evolves over time. Through this balance, she demonstrated how resilience can coexist with vulnerability, showing audiences that acknowledging pain does not diminish strength. For many, Ashley's openness was both inspiring and comforting. Families who had experienced similar losses saw themselves reflected in her honesty, while individuals struggling with mental illness felt understood rather than judged. Her message of compassion, truth, and action resonated widely, reinforcing Naomi Judd's own advocacy and extending her legacy into new realms. In transforming her grief into purpose, Ashley created a path for others to follow, to speak openly, seek help, and support those in need. Her actions highlighted a central truth: that the aftermath of loss can be a catalyst for change, education, and healing, not only for the immediate family, but also for communities and society at large. Through her voice, Ashley Judd ensured that Naomi's story would be remembered not only for the music that touched millions, but also for the lessons it provides about mental health, empathy, and the power of speaking truthfully in the face of tragedy. While Ashley Judd focused on advocacy and reflection, Winona Judd approached healing through music, honoring her mother's legacy with performances that were both personal and public. In the weeks and months following Naomi's death, Winona returned to the stage, performing the songs she had sung alongside her mother for decades. These concerts became more than entertainment. They became a shared ritual of mourning and remembrance, a space where fans and family could grieve together and celebrate Naomi's life. One of the most powerful examples was her frequent dedication of Love Can Build a Bridge to her mother. The song, already beloved, took on a deeper significance as Winona's voice carried both sorrow and resilience across the stage. Audience members often cried, sang along, or simply sat in silence, absorbing the emotion that poured from every note. For Winona, performing was a way to process grief, to keep her mother's memory alive, and to connect with fans who had also been touched by Naomi's music. Meanwhile, Ashley's approach was quieter but no less intentional. She created spaces for personal reflection, filling Naomi's home in Leaper's Fork with photographs, handwritten lyrics, and small reminders of the woman who had been both teacher and inspiration. She used these objects not just as memorials, but as anchors for her own healing, integrating her grief into daily life while continuing her advocacy work. The sisters' different methods of coping highlight the diversity of grief and the ways it can be expressed through action, reflection, or creativity. In sharing their experiences publicly, they helped illuminate the complexity of mental illness, trauma, and bereavement. The public response to both Ashley and Winona's actions reflected admiration for her courage and empathy. Fans praised Winona's emotional performances, describing them as healing experiences that honor Naomi's spirit while acknowledging the real pain behind the music. Meanwhile, Ashley's advocacy work drew attention to the importance of mental health resources, the nuances of suicide prevention, and the need for compassionate, stigma-free conversations about depression. Together, the sisters created a multifaceted legacy for Naomi Judd, one that intertwined music, advocacy, personal healing, and public education. This combined approach not only honored their mother's memory, but also provided a model for how families and communities can navigate tragedy, balance public attention with private grief, and turn sorrow into meaningful action. The Judd family's experience underscores a critical lesson that the impact of grief and mental illness extends beyond the individual, influencing relationships, communities, and even societal awareness. Through their words, actions, and performances, Ashley and Winona demonstrated that acknowledging pain and speaking openly about it can foster empathy, understanding, and positive change. Naomi Judd's life, while marked by extraordinary talent and success, was also defined by challenges that were often hidden from public view. By allowing her daughters to share her story, she ensured that her struggles, resilience, and humanity would be recognized, not just in music charts and awards, but in the broader conversations about mental health that continue to evolve today. The combination of Winona's public tribute through song and Ashley's advocacy work created a comprehensive homage to Naomi, illustrating that grief, love, and remembrance can coexist in multiple forms. Their efforts remind us that healing is not linear, that each individual processes loss differently, and that even in tragedy, there is potential for growth, understanding, and the continuation of a legacy that inspires compassion and action. Naomi Judd's life and death offer important lessons not only for her family and fans, but for society at large, highlighting the urgent need for understanding mental health and destigmatizing conversations about suicide. Through the public responses of her daughters, Ashley and Winona, her story has become a platform for advocacy, education, and empathy. Ashley's willingness to speak openly about her mother's struggles shows how honesty about mental illness can break cycles of silence that often surround depression and trauma. By describing the invisible battles Naomi faced, despite outward appearances of success and resilience, Ashley challenges the assumption that wealth, fame, or love automatically protect against mental illness. Her interviews, essays, and speeches emphasize that mental health struggles are complex, multi-layered, and deeply human, affecting not only those experiencing them but also the families, friends, and communities around them. Winona's emotional performances, meanwhile, demonstrate the therapeutic power of music and storytelling in processing grief and honoring memory. When she sings songs like Love Can Build a Bridge, audiences witness an act that transcends entertainment. It becomes a form of communal healing, a way to channel sorrow into connection, reflection, and hope. The public response of both sisters illustrates the power of vulnerability, showing that openness about grief and mental illness can foster compassion and understanding on a broad scale. Beyond emotional resonance, Ashley has also used her platform to advocate for practical change. She has urged better mental health resources, policies that protect privacy after a loved one's death by suicide, and culturally sensitive approaches to treatment and prevention. Her efforts highlight how personal tragedy can motivate systemic improvements that prevent future suffering. The Judd family story also underscores the importance of language in discussing mental health and suicide. Ashley's insistence on using phrases like died by suicide instead of committed suicide is not merely semantics. It is a deliberate act to reduce shame, avoid judgment, and focus on compassion. This shift in language encourages society to acknowledge the suffering behind suicide and mental illness, creating an environment where individuals and families feel understood rather than blamed. Naomi's life further illustrates that resilience and struggle often coexist. Even as she achieved extraordinary success, raised talented and accomplished daughters, and touched the lives of millions through her music, she grappled privately with depression, anxiety, and trauma that never fully disappeared. Her openness in memoirs, interviews, and public appearances regarding these challenges provides a roadmap for others navigating similar difficulties. It reminds us that the brightest lives can also carry unseen burdens, and that empathy and awareness are essential in supporting those who may be struggling silently. By transforming their grief into advocacy and meaningful action, Ashley and Winona demonstrate that loss can inspire growth, social change, and communal healing. Their work ensures that Naomi's legacy extends beyond her musical achievements, leaving a lasting impact on conversations about mental health, family, and the power of compassion. In this way, Naomi Judd's story continues to educate, comfort, and inspire, showing that even in the face of tragedy, lives can leave lessons of resilience, understanding, and the importance of speaking openly about mental health challenges. Her life, struggles, and the courageous actions of her daughters remind us that awareness, love, and advocacy are tools not only for survival, but also for building bridges of understanding, empathy, and hope that connect people across generations, experiences, and communities. After Naomi Judd's death, Ashley Judd's personal journey of healing became an essential part of her story and advocacy. While the world saw her as a public figure sharing painful truths, much of her grief was processed privately through reflection, therapy, and mindfulness practices. Ashley spent time in nature, meditating, journaling, and engaging in activities that allowed her to connect with herself and process the loss of her mother in a safe, intentional way. She acknowledged that grief is not linear and that healing is a gradual process that shifts over time. Even as she spoke publicly about mental illness and her mother's struggles, Ashley emphasized that personal grief requires patience, self-compassion, and space to feel and understand emotions without judgment. She often highlighted that loving someone with mental illness involves both courage and vulnerability, as it requires witnessing their pain while supporting them with empathy and understanding. Her experience reflects a broader truth. Coping with the loss of a loved one to suicide involves navigating complex emotions, including sorrow, anger, guilt, and acceptance. In her advocacy work, Ashley has intertwined her personal healing with broader efforts to educate society about depression, trauma, and suicide prevention. By sharing her story, she demonstrates that acknowledging pain is not a weakness, but a step toward understanding and helping others. She has emphasized the importance of providing mental health resources for families and individuals, reducing stigma, and creating environments where people feel safe to discuss struggles without fear of judgment. Through essays, interviews, and public speeches, Ashley has conveyed that grief can be transformed into purpose, and that sharing personal experiences can inspire systemic change. At the same time, Winona has continued to honor their mother through music, using performances as a way to connect with audiences while simultaneously processing her own grief. For both sisters, keeping Naomi's memory alive is not only a way to pay tribute, but also a form of healing. Their combined efforts highlight the multifaceted nature of coping with loss. Ashley through reflection and advocacy, Winona through music and performance, both contributing to a legacy that balances personal grief with public impact. Naomi Judd's life and the ways her daughters have responded to her death offer lessons for society about resilience, empathy, and the need to support those struggling with mental illness. By turning personal tragedy into advocacy and remembrance, Ashley and Winona provide examples of how families can honor their loved ones while educating and inspiring communities. The Judd family story encourages people to speak openly about mental health, to provide compassionate support, and to understand that depression and trauma are illnesses that require awareness, resources, and understanding. In this way, Naomi's legacy transcends her music, leaving a profound impact on conversations about mental health, grief, and the power of love and advocacy in the face of tragedy. Her daughter's work ensures that her story continues to teach, heal, and inspire, offering hope to countless individuals and families who face similar struggles, while reminding society that compassion and understanding are essential tools in both healing and prevention. Naomi Judd's life struggles and the responses of her daughters have had a lasting cultural impact, reshaping public conversations around mental health, grief, and suicide. Before her death, discussions about depression and suicide were often shrouded in stigma, secrecy, or misunderstanding. People rarely spoke openly about the realities of living with chronic mental illness, particularly in families or among high-profile figures. Naomi's story and Ashley Judd's candid recounting of her mother's life and death challenge these societal norms by providing a deeply personal and human perspective. Through interviews, essays, and public appearances, Ashley emphasized that mental illness does not discriminate based on